Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is pushing back on Senator Chuck Schumer's call for new elections to replace him. President Biden is standing behind Schumer's statements, intensifying the face-off between Israel and the United States.
Israel continues to make plans to go into Rafah despite opposition from the United States and the world. CBN's Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
Monday, Israeli forces carried out a raid on Al-Shifa hospital, Gaza's largest medical center, because they said it had intelligence that senior Hamas militants were in the complex and arrested 80 people. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Netanyahu is pushing back against U.S. pressure for new leadership. On Sunday, Netanyahu went on multiple U.S. networks to respond to Senator Chuck Schumer and the White House.
I think Schumer's statements are wholly inappropriate. I think we're not a banana republic. The people of Israel will choose when they'll have elections, who they'll elect, and it's not something that will be foisted upon us. That, you know, it's wrong to try to replace the elected leaders of a sister democracy and a staunch American ally at any time, but especially during the time of war.
Even before Schumer's speech last week, Israel's Channel 14 released a poll showing ongoing U.S. hostility has strengthened Netanyahu over his nearest political rival, Benny Gantz. The Jerusalem Post also reporting that a majority of Israelis support Netanyahu's day-after plan for the Gaza Strip when the war with Hamas is over. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz met with Netanyahu on Sunday. He said Germany stands with Israel, but like many nations, questions Israel's military operation in Rafah.
The longer the war lasts, the higher the number of civilian casualties rises, the more desperate the situation of the people in Gaza become, the more this begs the question, no matter how important the goal, can it justify such terribly high costs? Or are there other ways to achieve your goal?
On Friday, Israel's security cabinet agreed to a plan to enter Rafah. Egypt and the European Union object to that plan, and National Security Advisor John Kirby says the White House expects assurances of how Israel will take care of Gazans.
Now the Israelis will tell you they've got a plan for that, the evacuation, they call it humanitarian islands, and we welcome any credible plan to take care of them, but we haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen it yet.
The U.S. and other nations are calling for more humanitarian aid. CBN News witnessed the transfer of that aid by the IDF at the Kerem Shalom crossing into Gaza. Colonel Elad Goren of the Coordination of Government Activities in the Territories, or COGOT, says the problem is the UN is failing to distribute the aid once inside Gaza.
Just keep saying more, and it doesn't matter if we will pass 1,000 trucks here and they won't able to collect it, they will say that there is a humanitarian crisis. From our understanding, there is no humanitarian crisis. There are challenges, there are obstacles, and the main gap is the capacity of the UN agencies to deliver and to take responsibility over their own operation.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
I hope the world is listening to that from someone who's, you know, literally boots on the ground. They're saying the UN is failing here, and it's not new. There was a study done. It's by the Arab Barometer. It's part of Stanford University. They did a survey of Gaza before October 7th, and they released that survey in November. That survey showed that 68% of the population of Gaza faced food insecurity, that they were having trouble putting enough food on the table and wondering where their food was going to come every single day. Well, the IDF wasn't there at all. So if 68% of the population, just imagine what's happening now in wartime conditions with bombs coming in and soldiers. It's a humanitarian crisis, but it's based on what the UN failed to do for a long period of time. What Hamas is doing since 2006. And instead of building farms and building infrastructure and water and electricity and all the things that a city needs, instead of doing that, they were building tunnels. And here's the really bad news. They were building those tunnels. They were building their rockets with money from you and me. We contributed to that. We funded the UN. We funded UNRWA. We funded the Palestinian Authority. It's our money being wasted, misused, and misused for war. Now, Israel is in a desperate situation because the government, everybody wants to call it a terrorist group because it is, but it's also the government of Gaza, has vowed to repeat October 7 again and again and again and again until Israel is wiped off the map. If I lived in Israel, I would say, well, you're the one that's going to be wiped off the map. You can't be in power anymore if you hold these thoughts. And behind all of this, there are over 100 hostages still held in these horrible tunnels. This needs to end, but it's on Hamas. It's not on Israel. If you're concerned about the civilians in Gaza, you need to put pressure on Hamas. Lay down your arms, unconditionally surrender, release all the hostages, and pledge that you will leave power and that you will not ever try to wipe Israel off the planet again. If you do those things, well, then we can have peace, and this crisis, and it's a very real crisis for the people there, can be averted.